Hello, folks. You have tuned back in again to Free to Soar. I am Rebecca Adams, and I have Becky Vermeer with me.
Hello.
Thank you. It's going to be one of our trademarks, is that you have to do the
Mrs. Doubtfire.
Mrs. Doubtfire hello. I just love it.
Well, it's good to see you. I see you're sporting your Kansas City Chiefs red.
Oh, go Chiefs! Chiefs! You better believe it. So, folks, we are recording this the night after the Super Bowl, and yeah, I am pumped. And I never used to be a football fan, never liked it or anything, but ooh, Patrick Mahomes, oh my goodness. I won't watch any other team, but I'll watch him because he is amazing. Oh my goodness. You
Well, I
never know
will
what
say it was a good game.
it was. It
Yeah.
was. He's kind of
Yeah.
like you, Becky. Like, I never know what you're going to ask. I never know what he's going to do. Yeah. Oh, man. So I think between the AFC Championship game and yesterday's Super Bowl, I think I have chewed off all of my fingernails. I've gone to the toenails, and I think all of my hair has turned completely white. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot
Yeah.
of stress.
Yeah, yeah, that was a good game. Want to hear something funny?
Always.
Okay. So you know how on the inside of a like a hoodie or a sweatshirt, it's soft, okay?
Mhm, mhm.
So I wasn't even thinking about it, right? And I usually put stuff on, I start at the crown of my head and then I bring it over my head if I'm getting dressed, right? For some reason, this day I was putting on a sweatshirt and I put it on here and I'm trying to move it back. It would not move. It was stuck like Velcro. I
So let me get this straight. You
what's that?
shaved your head and your hair turned to Velcro.
It's yep, yep.
Wow, that's a good trick.
It is, isn't it? I can still do it. See? And it won't move.
Hey, you know what the good news is though too? You don't have that whole static cling, your hair sticking straight up and stuff, because
Mm-mm.
it really can't right now.
No. Mm-mm.
So
And
that's all right.
even better yet, I could do it this way, see? And it
Yeah,
it just it doesn't want to move.
yeah. I
I
never would
laugh
have thought
so
that.
I laughed so hard because I was not expecting that. I wasn't even thinking about what I was doing, you know. I thought I got to tell Becky that one. That's a good one.
That's good. I like that.
I figured you
It
would.
kind of makes me want to shave my head just to experience it, but no.
Yeah, okay. I
I
got
think
you.
Becky needs hair. That's just, I mean, I don't have a lot, but what I have needs to stay.
Oh, listen, you will definitely be seeing me eventually just in a wig on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because this is just ridiculous. It's embarrassing how bald I am up here. If I had known it was that bad, I would have been wearing a wig a long time ago. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
I think I like your hair.
Thank you. It's about the I want it a little bit longer than that, but I'm liking it. I really am.
I
It's
like the way it looks.
Thank you. Thank you. And my friend, I have good news. My friend that I shaved my head to support her,
Hmm.
hair is starting to grow back in.
Awesome.
I know.
Fantastic. That's
I'm so
great.
excited. So I'm going to go and get one more haircut so that she has the longer hair and then we can compare. But I don't want to be the one that has the longer hair and she's got to try to catch up with me.
Yeah.
I want to
That's
give her the
awesome. That's
advantage.
such great news. I'm happy about that.
I know. I am too. That was
Yeah.
just, I got so excited when she told me that.
Mhm. I wonder if it'll be curly. Does she have normally straight hair?
it was, it was pretty straight. Yeah, it wasn't really, it had some good body to it. I mean, she's a hairdresser, has been. She's a retired hairdresser. So she really
Yeah.
knew how to take care of it. It was about halfway down her back. It was just beautiful and thick. And yeah. So she's not sure what she's going to do. She's going to just go with short and then never grow it out long again. She's not really sure. But her husband had bought her several wigs. And so I've seen her in different wigs. She rocks them all. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, she's real pretty. And so she
Yeah.
just looks so good with them.
That's great.
And I wanted to tell the audience I have a new companion back here. I had to put my puller boy down. He had an enlarged heart, broke my heart. So then I want to show you what, of course, you can't really see my necklace that I wear. I don't have my camera going down that far, I guess. But these are his ashes, some of his ashes in here. And if I can read this, it says, "Your wings were ready, but my heart was not." It's got a little
That's
blue
sweet.
paw print on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always have my boy with me. So I just adopted this little gal on Saturday, and she is exhausted. She's a new mama, and her pups are weaned, and she just was spayed on Thursday. So she's got a lot to recover from. So you're probably not going to see her moving around too much tonight. She's been doing a lot of sleeping since she came to my house, but her name
I
is
think that just means she's comfortable.
exactly, and her name is Bubbles.
Bubbles.
Yes, my grandsons and my son helped name her, and so we all agreed Bubbles fits her personality. She's a sweetheart, an absolute sweetheart.
Well, congratulations. I'm super happy for you.
Thank you. We're having a lot of fun.
Yeah. Life is better when you have a puppy in it.
Yes, it is. Speaking of your puppy, where is he?
Well, he's been running around here hollering at me and burying bones and things, so he will probably show up at some point tonight because he likes to get on camera every time we record.
I think
So
he's only missed what, one episode?
maybe one, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll either hear him or see him or both before the day is done. So, oh yeah, he's in the room right now and he's burying a bone. So
Oh, well, we won't watch.
yeah, no, I can't know where it is. It's a secret.
Yeah. Even
Yeah,
though it's out there on top of the carpet.
correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
So he may say hello after a while.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to that. It'll be right when you're in the midst of a very serious topic and you're answering it.
Probably.
That's when he's
Yeah,
going to want to come up.
yeah. That's usually when he shows up. That's his favorite.
Yeah. He's comic relief.
He does like to be on camera. Who
Yes, he
knew?
does. He's quite the ham.
I wonder where he gets that. I don't know.
I don't know. He's not copying you.
No, because I'm not a camera ham at all.
No, I'm
No.
not either. I'm not either. I'm the one who takes the pictures of
Oh,
other things, but I don't like being in the camera view. So yeah.
yeah.
So
I might.
you're what?
I said I might. I can't take like real pictures. Like if I have to do like a formal posed picture, count me out. It will always look like a driver's license photo. In fact, a driver's license photo might be better. But if I can be silly, I can take pictures all day long.
I was always like that. I just couldn't stand pictures of myself. And
Oh
so
yeah.
finally I figured out the trick. When I look at the camera, I look and I smile at my sons and my grandsons, and I just think about how much I love them, and it turns out to be a pretty good picture.
Huh. Well,
So
there you go. That's a good trick.
yeah, it works for me.
I might try
There you go.
it.
So we actually got a comment from one of our viewers, and it sounded like something that you could talk about. And I sent it to you. Can you kind of just paraphrase what that was about?
Yeah, I might actually have to read it a little bit here. Now,
Okay.
I know we were talking about some domestic violence myths.
Yes.
And so a question came in saying that they wanted to comment on the video that they were watching. And the question is, can both people be abusers? And so this person goes on to talk about her son and his ex, how she says they kind of took turns apparently abusing each other. Her shorthand version was that the daughter-in-law hates men and the son has a short fuse. So yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. And we may have addressed it a little bit before in a former episode, but knowing what I know about domestic violence, and knowing that someone who is an abuser is motivated to maintain power and control. Like, it's purposeful behavior done with a specific intent and purpose in mind, which is to maintain power and control. What we see a lot in that dynamic when someone has been the victim of physical abuse, I've heard people make statements like, I got to the place in my relationship where I said, you pick the weapons, I'll go to war.
Mm.
And I have heard somebody even say, if your weapon was words, I'll go to war with you with words. If your weapon is fists, I'll go to war with you with fists. But what we've done in the domestic violence movement with the research into the situation, the relationships and the dynamics of the relationships and things, we've come up with a term, not come up with, but we've recognized a term called primary aggressor. This even carries over to like law enforcement. When law enforcement responds to a domestic dispute, and perhaps both people have been in a physical altercation, it's a law enforcement official's responsibility when they get there to assess the situation and find out who was the primary aggressor in the situation. And so the primary aggressor is the one then that they would look at, that if arrest needs to be made, they would arrest the primary aggressor, knowing that sometimes self-defense can look like aggression, can look like abuse, etc. And so I guess my answer to that question was, we need to know a little bit more about the dynamics of the relationship. Do I think that women can be abusive? Yes. I've never said one time in the recordings that we've done that women can't be abusers, because I think that they can.
Yeah.
But I know statistically speaking, more often than not, when you're talking about an abusive relationship, the norm is typically the male in the relationship is the one that's motivated to maintain the power and control over the female. But women can as well be abusers. And so my question for the person who left the comment is, I would recommend, and that's not necessarily a question, it's a statement, I would recommend paying attention to the dynamic of the relationship. Is there a primary aggressor? Or is it one person has been abusing the other person for so long that the second person decides to fight back? What's going on in that dynamic? So I hate to say that both people can be abusers, because that doesn't resonate with me. Like, I don't think that two people would enter into a relationship both motivated to maintain power and control and stay in it, because it's not going to work, because they're both fighting for the power and control. I could see that being a short-term relationship, not a long-term relationship. But, I still defer back to who's the primary aggressor. And then you and I have talked about this lots of times before, how when we're talking about who's the primary aggressor, does the other person fight back? If the primary aggressor is male and the victim in that scenario is a female, does she have to have something to defend herself with, and maybe she grabs a weapon of sorts, not necessarily a weapon, but the frying pan, or something sitting in the house that would actually make her look like the primary aggressor in that situation. But is she? That's the hard part, is, unless you actually have the ability to step into that household and observe what's going on in that altercation, I don't know who the primary aggressor is, but I'm still going to fall back to that. I'm going to fall back to that typically, if a male is an abuser, he's typically the primary aggressor. I'm going to fall back to that. And then I'm also going to fall back to, statistically speaking, women are typically more often than not the victims of that abuse, and men are not. Can men be victims? 100% yes. And we can see men be victims in a relationship with a female. We also see men be victims in same-sex relationships. And so I know that a man can definitely be the victim in an abusive situation. And we've talked before, where even in our candlelight vigils that we host every year, we've had men be our keynote speaker, talking about the situation that they experienced at the hands of their abuser, who was a woman. So I'm not saying it's never going to happen. I don't know if that answers the question, because I have a lot of questions for that person. What is the dynamic of the relationship, etc.
Sure.
But the bottom line is both people in the relationship are abusive like that. It's an unhealthy relationship. So they both need to get some help to change their behavior, or that relationship's not going to work, unfortunately.
How far do you see that can go, that anger coming from both of them. I mean,
it can go as far as people are willing to tolerate. I mean, it can go all the way till somebody dies, unfortunately,
okay. Yeah.
or, you know, somebody gets seriously injured. It can go that far. Abusive relationships can go that far.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, I mean, it's the same potential for disaster that an abusive relationship is.
When law enforcement are called, are they accurate in picking the primary aggressor, or do they miss it quite a bit of the time because of the way, the primary aggressor can be so calm, cool, and collected and make it sound like, oh no, it's the other person's fault. It's not my fault. I would never do that. I mean,
Yeah.
are they believing the correct person, do you think, for the most part? What do you see?
I mean, that's a good question. And you're right. Like, that would be my response to that is what we see a lot in abusive relationships is we see the abuser antagonize and antagonize and antagonize and threaten and scare and intimidate and threaten and scare and intimidate. And then we see a victim be hysterical in the situation that they're in because they're being threatened and intimidated and injured. So then that when the police do show up, you're right, most of the time we have an abuser who is now calmed down, because what have we talked about before? The public person and the private person are two different people. And so the way I act behind closed doors with just my intimate partner is not the way that I'm going to act at church or at the bank or when the law enforcement official arrives at my home. And so in the old days, 20 years ago, before even the term primary aggressor was used, we would see law enforcement respond to a dispute like that. The abuser was calm, cool, and collected. The victim was hysterical, and we'd see the victim a lot of the time get arrested for
Yeah.
being the victim.
Yeah.
I do think with the education that law enforcement officials are given, they know more about domestic violence than they did even 20 years ago. A lot of police forces even have domestic violence investigators on their staff who've been highly trained in the dynamics, etc. And now we have a term, that primary aggressor term. I do think that there's more information available there. And so if the police responding to that situation take advantage of the resources and the information they have, I think they would do a better job making the arrest where the arrest needs to be made. I'm giving you a political answer, can you tell?
That's fine. Because I know that you see these kind of things, and I don't know how things are looking in our culture right now. So that's
Right.
good to.
You know, the hard thing is when we're talking about these kind of things, and we've talked about this before too, not every police officer acts the same. One police officer can have an opinion of this, and then another person can look at that and have a completely different opinion. And so, you know, you have to put your faith in that officer that they've done the best they can in that situation. The good news is, let's say they make the wrong arrest. Let's say they arrest the person who was the victim and not the aggressor. And let's say that comes across the prosecutor's desk, excuse me. If we as domestic violence educators have done our job, we've made the prosecutor aware of these things too. And so the prosecutor could look at that and read the notes and everything else and say, I don't think that this is correct. The prosecutor doesn't have to prosecute that case.
Okay, good.
So, I mean, that's the situation we find ourselves in, where sometimes you can have a really good cop and a really bad prosecutor and an even worse judge. Or you have a not so great cop, but a really good prosecutor and a not great judge. Or you can have a great judge and a great prosecutor and a great police officer, and it all goes well. And, you know, that's why I'm being political a little bit with the answer, because it really does depend on what level of training that person has received. What is that particular agency's opinion or education or policy or procedures around it? There's a lot of things that feed into it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it could be from all these different areas, it could paint an entirely different scenario.
When we talked about the power and control wheel before, and we talked about institutions and how sometimes institutions can work to re-victimize the victim, that's an example of that, where, you know, again, the cop may arrest the wrong person and the prosecutor says no, or the cop might arrest the right person and the prosecutor doesn't understand and the case gets dropped. So I wish there was like a classic step 1, step 2, step 3, and that's the answer. But when you're dealing with people, it's never step 1, step 2, step 3, and that's the answer, because people can do all kinds of things that weren't in the textbook.
True.
But I still refer back to, I stand firm on, let's take a look at who's the primary aggressor in the situation. Mm-hmm. Is it possible with the question that we received that the female in the home is always the primary aggressor? Sure, it's possible. It's possible that that's what's happening, and then the man in the home is just defending himself. It's possible that the man is always the primary aggressor and the woman's defending herself. It's possible that they can change up on that. And sometimes for no reason she's physically, or not no reason, but for sometimes she's the one that's the aggressor first, and sometimes he's the aggressor first. It's possible. What we have to pay attention to in a lot of the conversations that you and I are having, that people are watching, we're dealing with a lot of gray areas. There's no such thing as black and white. There's really not. I would like to think that there was, but there's no such thing as black and white. I know there was a little bit of controversy. Someone viewed one of our episodes last week, and there was a misunderstanding of a statement that specifically I had made, and that person took it and ran with it in a completely wrong direction, and that's not at all what I said. So, you know, there's a lot of gray areas when you're talking about people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I guess, you know, I end up coming up with a scenario in my mind that maybe law enforcement does get the primary aggressor, and that of course the prosecutor prosecutes it, and of course the judge sees what was wrong, and he takes care of it and uses the law to make things right. But in your experience, in reality,
that doesn't always happen.
Mm-mm.
I'm not going to say it never happens, because it does.
Right.
But I'm not going to say it always happens, because it doesn't.
Right. That's sad.
Well, you know, I think about it, like in Missouri, we've talked about this before too. Missouri didn't pass the Adult Abuse Act until 1980. Yeah. So if you look at that, what year is this? 2023. So in the state of Missouri, it's only been 43 years since we've had an Adult Abuse Act. Mm-hmm. So have we done well? Did I do my math right? Yeah, 43 years. Have we done well in educating the powers that be in the communities and social services and law enforcement and judges, etc.? Sure, we've done a great job of educating people about all of that. Does that mean everybody's on the same page still? No.
No. Unfortunately, no.
And when you're talking law, etc., 43 years isn't that long, to be honest with you.
No.
For a law to be in place. Mm-mm. So
it really is.
We've made great strides with education and such, but we'll never be done. We'll never be done educating people.
No, not until, like you, I love how you say, why don't we just lock up all the abusers and throw away the key?
Yeah. Or make people carry papers. If all the abusers that we knew had to carry papers that told everybody they were an abuser, we'd make a lot of progress. But
you know, I like that scenario, but you know what my preference would be is that the abusers would have this flashing neon light that shines over their head. Abuser, 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 abuser.
It just says run away. Run away, yeah. Run away.
Yeah, exactly. And that way I'd be like, I'll go over here.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always thought, you meet somebody for the first time and say, can you show me your papers? That'd be so much easier.
Well, or if the flashing neon light,
I mean, the flashing sign works well too. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you could just say, hey, could you turn on your neon light, please, and let me see what.
That's actually even easier, because, you know, you could be across the room from somebody and be like, okay, stay away from there.
Right. I don't want to
drive it in the car. You can still see it. Like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefit to that.
Isn't there?
Yeah.
Is there a way we can figure that out and put that into? No. Okay. Well, it's a good idea.
I like the idea, but it's never going to happen.
No. Not going to happen. Okay.
Carrying a card that says you're an abuser is never going to happen either. So, yeah. So that's why I say we're never going to educate everybody. We will always need education.
This is true.
Yeah.
So going back to that question that they commented on, How do you recommend the family cope with it? Because this is getting to be a very difficult thing from what I understand of what she said. Regardless, and again, we don't know who the primary aggressor is, but how in the world do you cope with that? Because there's a child involved and having to help raise that child, and yet you've got these two raging adults at each other's throats.
Right.
How in the world?
I mean, it's incredibly volatile.
Yeah.
And so, when you're dealing with a volatile situation like that, it can get lethal at any given moment, unfortunately. And so, I mean, the main thing would be, if you're dealing with two people with that type of behavior, the first step in solving a problem is admitting you have one.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the thing. If either person will be willing to take ownership of the behavior, then you could change the behavior. But I don't know the people. So, I mean, as a mother watching that, I would do everything I could to make sure that if that was my grandchild, that my grandchild is safe. But I'd also want my child to be safe. And so if my child was the one that was the primary aggressor, I'd have to love my child enough to say, hey, you've got a problem here, and what can I do to help you with it? If my child wasn't the primary aggressor, my child was the victim, I would say, this is not a safe space for you to be. What can we do to safety plan around that? Is it safe for you to stay here? Do you need to go to a shelter? Do you need to come stay with me for a while? Whatever that situation is. Unless a person is willing to take ownership of their behavior, they will never change it. And not to be a buzzkill, but frequently when someone is an abuser, it's challenging for them to take ownership of their behavior, because as an abuser, everything outside of that person is responsible for their behavior. You looked at me wrong. My boss yelled at me. The kid said a nasty name in my direction. Whatever it was, all of those things are the reason I have to be abusive. The way that an abuser changes is realize that I abuse because I abuse, and I don't want to do it anymore. And if an abuser is willing to admit that, they can change their behavior. But that's a big admission.
That is a big admission. And that brings me back to when I was just about ready to submit my book to the publishers, my manuscript. And I just had this gnawing question that just would not leave. So I called the crisis center, and it just so happened that my court advocate is the one who answered. And I said, do these guys ever change? I've just got to know. And she said, I've done a lot of research, because I told her, I said, I've been looking and there isn't a website that I can see that will commit to any kind of an answer with that. And I will never forget her words. She said, 99% of them do not change. And I about fell off my chair, because then in my mind, I'm turning it around, turning that statistic around. That means 1% change. And she said there are some websites that wouldn't even commit to 1% because it's so low.
Yeah.
And I can understand that if they are, let's say, for example, they're a narcissist. So in their eyes, everything they do is correct. So why would they lower themselves to admit that what they're doing is wrong?
Right.
Have you
Well, do you
seen,
remember? Go ahead.
have you seen any scenarios in your 26 years of doing this of an abuser changing, literally changing, or even trying to change?
I know someone who was a former abuser who
Really?
changed. Know
Wow.
him very well, actually, as a colleague who's since retired. So I haven't had the opportunity to speak with that person for a while, but as a colleague working in the movement, he himself is an admitted abuser. And he did change his behavior, so much so that he started a batterers intervention program to try to help other abusers stop abusing. And I know that in my state, in Missouri, with our state coalition, you've heard me talk about our state coalition multiple times. He actually was called to ask to sit at the table when our state coalition was creating standards around what does a good batter's intervention program look like. He was at the table weighing in on that conversation.
I would.
Married to the same woman, they stayed together, and he changed his behavior, and they are still married. Yes, and that is the exception, not the rule,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Wow.
But you remember maybe a year ago, we've had this conversation before, when we
Yeah.
very first started talking about domestic violence. I asked you, do you know the number one reason why abusers abuse?
Because it works.
Remember, it works. That's the answer to the question.
Yep.
If I'm motivated to maintain power and control over my intimate partner, then I will abuse them because it works and I can maintain power and control.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do I think that 99% of men are motivated to maintain power and control over their intimate partner? No, absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely.
I understand that. Yeah.
Typically what we see is a population of men who are motivated to be abusers abuse multiple victims.
Mm-hmm.
It's not every man.
Right.
So I always want to make sure that we're not sharing a message where we're anti-man. We are absolutely not. Because
Yeah.
I don't think that every man is abusive. I would never dream. I know men who aren't abusive, for heaven's sake. So no, I would never dream of saying that. But
And that's and I have to address this again. Just hearing you say that, it's still a thing with me because it's still something after 48 years of domestic violence that I have survived. It's really hard for me to not see that every, or that most, let me say it that way, that most men are abusive. So it's still working on me. I'm
yeah,
hearing what you're saying. I'm listening to you. I really am. And the
yeah,
other thing that still gets me, and you said it again in this episode, is how that it's planned and it's purposeful. I think if I live to be 100 and we do these episodes, continue to do these, I don't know if I'm ever going to get past that.
mm-hmm.
It's just when I know I've
Well, it
said
doesn't
that.
make sense. I mean, you heard my classic statement. The reasonable mind tries to make reason of unreasonable behavior. It doesn't make sense. I can tell you, after working in the shelter for 20, I'm going on 26 years, I don't understand it either. I don't understand someone who's so motivated by power and control that they're willing to physically assault another person. I don't understand it. And I've worked with thousands, literally thousands of victims of domestic violence. But if you want me to say I understand it, no. Do I understand the dynamic? Do I get it? I get it. But at the my heart of hearts, I could never do that.
Right.
Usually or not usually, always, if I'm willing to say I love this person, my motivation is to nurture and protect and care
Mm-hmm.
for,
Mm-hmm.
not abuse. It's not in me.
Exactly. So going back to that family again with the question that had the
Mm-hmm.
question. Okay. So what if you were talking about if that conversation, you don't know if that conversation has taken place yet. Let's just paint this scenario, just choose a couple, draw them out of the hat. So let's say that this is the mother that's writing and it's her son that's the abuser, the primary aggressor. Okay. So let's say that mother has had that conversation with that son, and he continues to just do what he wants to do and he continues to abuse. What do you recommend then?
Safety plan with the spouse and the children. Here's something else we have to pay attention to. And this, again, we're reading into a scenario that we don't know about. So,
Exactly.
we're reading into a dynamic that may not even exist. But in my mind, if it would be the son that's being abusive, what level of respect do you think that son has for the mother?
This is true. Not very much.
So, we'd have to consider, would it be safe for the mom to go to the son?
Mm,
I don't know that it would be safe. Do they
true.
have the kind of relationship where she can go to the son? I mean, I would hope, but I don't know.
So
Safety,
maybe,
it's just safety planning is screaming at me. Like this is the dynamic that's going on. What she's seeing is that both people are equally abusive. Then we need a safety plan around the household. Who's
mhm,
getting hurt? Why are people getting hurt? People
mhm,
can't continue to get hurt.
mhm. So is it best that if there's a father in the picture, that the father talk to them if the son will listen? Or is it best to find somebody a male that he respects or someone that he respects?
I mean, potentially. I mean, then you have to ask the question, if it's the son, where did the son learn the behavior? Did the son just pick it up? Did the
Right.
son observe it? Like, I don't know. I mean, there's so many different things that could be going on in a scenario.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It's a hard scenario because at the root, again, I'd like to know who's the primary aggressor.
Yeah.
I'm willing to concede the point that if the person is saying both people are being abusive, I'm willing to concede that it's possible that both people are being abusive.
Okay.
So again, what's at the root of that? Is it two angry people exercising bad behavior? Because we know, we've talked about it before, two angry people exercising bad behavior is not necessarily domestic violence, right?
Right. Right.
Because domestic violence, again, is motivated by power and control.
Mhm.
So do we have a dynamic of just two angry people who with unhealthy coping skills who take it out on each other? That's a completely different scenario.
Mhm. Very
That's
different.
what that's why I say it just raises a lot of questions for me. Like,
Sure.
what is the dynamic in the home?
Yeah.
Because two angry people can be in a relationship with each other,
Mm-hmm.
and two angry people can carry it to the point where they even hit each other.
Mm-hmm.
But again, is that really domestic violence or is it two angry people exercising bad behavior? It's a
Mm-hmm.
fine line.
It is a fine
It's
line.
it's definitely violence and
Mm-hmm.
it's happening in a relationship, so it's definitely domestic violence. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yes, by nature and definition it is.
Yeah.
But is there a single one of them motivated by power and control, or they just have bad coping skills?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. If okay, let's pick up that scenario. Let's say it's that scenario.
Okay.
So then really is there any other option other than the fact that they go to counseling separately and learn correct coping skills?
No. I mean, that's the answer. Like, if I have unhealthy behavior and my anger is such an issue that I physically lash out at someone, I need to learn how to control my anger.
Mm-hmm.
And just the average Joe on the street, if it's that intense, probably yes, would need some type of intervention to help with that.
That makes sense.
Or some, I mean, it doesn't necessarily even have to be a licensed counselor. It could be a really good friend who says, "Hey, you've got to stop. You got to stop doing that. Like somebody's really going to get hurt."
And you think, see, this is something that I ran into with the psychologist I was seeing down in Branson. She got to the point after a couple of years, she said, I really think you're good. I think you can, we don't need to see each other. You don't need to come in and see me on a regular basis anymore. And I just kind of freaked out. I'm like, but I got my whole life ahead of me here. And so what am I going to do when different things come up? And she said, well, you have friends. And I said, but they're not like, they don't have a degree, they don't have, can they really help me? So, so you're saying that could actually work.
You know, the domestic violence movement got started.
I remember you told me before, and I love this. I love this
It's a
story.
group of women sitting around the coffee table saying, "Hey, you know what happened to me last night?"
Mm-hmm.
And another woman saying, "That's not okay. That's terrible that that happened.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't have to endure that. That's not a counselor. That's a concerned friend."
Yeah.
Concerned friends who really are concerned and who really do care can make a huge difference in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
What I usually say to people is if you have one or two people in your life that you can completely trust, you have a gold mine.
Mm-hmm.
You can't necessarily completely trust more than one or two people in your life, let's be honest.
Yeah.
You might be able to, but let's be honest, not everybody has your best interest at heart.
It's
So
true.
if you really do have a friend that's close enough, one, to call you on your stuff and
Mhm.
say, hey, your stuff is stinky, what can we do about it? If you have that, or you have a friend you can say this and this, and they're willing to listen and help and support, you've got a gold mine.
Mhm.
Some people are lucky to have more than one or two, but honestly, I've always believed one or two is all you need.
And I've got to echo that. You're exactly right. I was getting ready to send somebody that I was really wanting to keep a relationship going with this person, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a family member. And so I took this to this one friend of mine. She's like a sister, and we used to be neighbors. And I took this text message to her and I showed it to her and I said, "What do you think?" Or I sent it to her. I said, "What do you think about that?" And she said, "Well, I hear you talking about yourself an awful lot in that." She said, "It sounds kind of narcissistic to me." And it's exactly what I needed. I needed her to be fully honest with me, and she was. And so it caused me to step back, and I'm going, okay. So then I pay attention even more so now than I used to with how I respond just in an everyday email at work and any other kind of communication like that, so that it's not all about me. I was just so freaked out trying to figure out, what am I going to say to this person? How do I say it? I want to say it right. I don't want to cut it off. I want, that I didn't know what else to say. And so then
Yeah,
I reframed it and she said, "Oh, I think that's perfect. Send it."
yeah.
And I did.
And you trust her.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't just trust everybody,
No.
unfortunately.
Mm-mm. No, she's definitely got my back, and she's willing to be fully honest with me, and I so appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I even told you with counseling, if you're going to go to a counselor for the first time, I think the very first thing you ever say to a counselor, honestly, is, why do you think you want to help me?
I just love that. I had forgotten that you said that. I love that.
What's their motive here?
Hmm.
There's for sure a motive.
Yeah.
If they can't answer it, don't go don't go back.
I like that.
Because they should be, a lot of people give that cliche, well, I like to help people. Okay, but what's your motive?
Yeah.
What is it you
Hmm.
want to accomplish here?
That's good.
And I tell people that all the time. I absolutely 100% believe in counseling. I think it's fantastic. And I think the healthiest people on the planet go to counseling.
Hmm.
But don't just blindly go to somebody and dump all your stuff before you know what they're going to get out of it.
I really like that because I've been to so many counselors prior, like when I was still in my marriage. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell people it's like going to buy shoes. You don't just walk in, try on one pair of shoes and say, "Yeah, those are great," and walk out. And then you end up with blisters all over your feet. You're going to walk around, you're going to try them out. You're going to say, "No, you know what? That pinches here and it doesn't feel good there and it's too big or it's too small." And you're going to keep trying on shoes until you find a pair that is exactly what you're looking for.
Right.
And that's the way it is with counseling for me. I have to choose somebody that I'm comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Because you're looking for somebody that you're willing to share the most intimate details of your life with. And
Absolutely.
so if you walk into a counselor's office and you don't like he or she, whatever, whoever that person is, and you still feel compelled to tell them all your stuff, you've made a horrible mistake. Because this is the most intimate piece of you. And
Mm-hmm.
so you should always listen to your gut. If your gut says run away, run away. That doesn't mean that the person you're talking to is bad. I'm not even saying that. I'm just
Right.
like you. Not every counselor is going to work for every person. It's
Mm-hmm.
because none of us are the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say you better ask them why they want to help you.
I love that. I have one other random question for you to tackle tonight. I don't know exactly where we're going to end up going with this, but I've
Woohoo!
this scenario painted where it was a preteen, and just literally all of a sudden one morning as the family got up, to start the day, boom, it was like somebody had brought in a different kid, stuck it in their house, just happened to look just like their kid, but it wasn't their kid.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend that let's say it's a single mom? Okay, what does she do in a case like that? I mean, that because that changes the whole dynamic of your home. Your home no longer flows like it has,
Sure.
and it affects everybody.
Yeah. I mean, that raises a lot of questions for me because, I mean, the first thing I have to ask you is what does a completely different kid mean? What was the
Okay.
kid before and what are they now? Like, what does that mean? How was the kid different?
The kid was very angry, didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to have anything to do with anybody, just this rage all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Very odd. And before, the child had been insecure and not sure of themselves and all that, but not explosive, not like that.
So, what did explosive look like?
um Ripping and jerking things around, and um just snapping quick answers at whoever would say something, whether it was a sibling or whatever, and you know didn't want to do what the parents asked the child to do, and just everything was just all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so you're saying it's a preteen that could just be teenage angst. Is it teenage angst? I mean, there's a situation where teenagers do change overnight. You feel like you have an alien in your home all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
So are we talking normal teenage behavior that all of a sudden woke up this morning and turned into an alien? Are we talking male or female?
Female.
So in a female scenario, there's a lot of physical changes that take place in that age group that could cause a lot of behaviors that weren't there yesterday that are there today, hormonal changes and everything else. And so, I mean, I throw the word teenage angst around a lot because teenagers are always angsty and
Mm-hmm.
they can be horrible to live with. I mean, you can have an even killed child all of a sudden just become angry and you don't know why. So, are there other things that play into this? Or is it normal teenage angst? That's my question for you.
That's my question. Okay. Great. I don't know on this. Let's just say this just happened. So, do you recommend that the mom all of a sudden take the child to counseling, or to the doctor, or what do you recommend, like step
Well,
one?
I mean, again, if we're talking normal teenage angst, it's something that you got to wait out a little bit. What's the root cause? If you have a child that's willing to talk to you and you can get to what's the root cause, well, there you go. Maybe then you can work past it, whatever that might happen to be. If you have a child that's not willing to talk to you, knowing teenagers the way that I know teenagers, you may have to wait for a while before they're willing to talk to you. And then in the weirdest place in time, they're going to throw it all out at you. Like, I mean, that can happen too. And so, um, in the work that I do, I have to be careful to not be hyper vigilant because a behavior change a lot of times indicates to me that something has happened. And so, I mean, you're not saying something has happened. So my classic statement for that is I can't look for the devil behind every door, but as a mom in that scenario, if all of a sudden I woke up with a devil child, I'd kind of want to pay attention to, okay, what's going on here? And if the child doesn't want to talk to me, I would start watching for signs. What's the behavior look like? Is it anger straight across the board at everybody in the family? Is it anger directed specifically to one person? Who is that one person? Sometimes when something has happened to a child, the mom is the target for the anger because they look at the mom to be the caretaker and the nurturer in the home. And if mom's not caretaking and nurturing, it's their fault something happened to me. And so the mom might be the easy target. But if there are other siblings in the home, if there's a dad in the home and they're all getting the same behavior, I go back to its teenage angst. And there's a lot of variables that play into a question like that.
Okay. So there's
Again,
not.
because of the work that I do, I can be hyper vigilant. And so I don't want to share a message with the world that says, if you wake up today and your teenager has changed their behavior overnight, something terrible has happened to them, because that's not true.
Okay.
Because teenagers aren't human anyway. You know, they
Amen,
lose
sister.
their mind for a little while. And so, we all just have to be prepared for that stage of life when those kind of things happen. And so is it normal devil teenage behavior, or is there something else that's going on? And so, you have to really watch for some signs and pay attention. And even a teenager that has had something happen to them will have moments where they're not angry and they just really need to talk to somebody. And so those are the times that you would ask, probing questions. Maybe they're being bullied at school. Okay, well, you're taking it out at home because it's a safe place to take it out on, because your mom's going to love you no matter what. So if you're being bullied, you can take it out on your mom, but you can't take it out at school. Watch that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that play into a changed behavior.
Okay, that's good. I think
So
you
I mean,
said.
it could be as simple as, I guess we're all adults. I started my period and I don't know what to do about it. And now
Mm-hmm.
I'm mad at the world. And I don't want to tell anybody because I'm embarrassed. It's
Mm-hmm.
not every mother has that conversation with their daughter about these things are going to happen to you. It could be something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it could be I was bullied at school, or it could be my brothers are picking on me, or it could be you didn't make what I wanted you to make for dinner last night, and teenage angst. There's a lot of things that can play into a changed behavior. But
Okay.
then there might be some giving signs. And so, are there other signs in the scenario that you're aware of that you can talk about, or
No, there really wasn't, from what I understood. So, yeah.
yeah.
So it's not much to go on. And I
Right.
didn't know if that there was like a one pat answer. I should know by now that there's not.
I mean, when you're dealing with people, there's never one pat answer. But my advice would be pay attention to the behavior. Pay attention to facial expressions, pay attention to words that are muttered, pay attention to actions. Is there a repeated action that's not normal than an action that it used to be? Then what's that action that's not normal, that's a new behavior?
Hmm. Well, I know that everything changed. The behaviors did. There
Mm-hmm.
was no returning back to what the child had been before.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very concerning and puzzling.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So it very well could be a trauma response. Maybe there was some kind of trauma. And I don't know what it could be, an emotional trauma. It could be a physical trauma. It could be something like that caused such a behavior change.
That's good to
Trauma
know.
trauma makes us do crazy things when we're trying, especially you're talking a preteen.
Mm-hmm.
A preteen does not have the emotional intelligence to process things the way that an adult does.
Mm-mm.
And a teenager doesn't have the emotional intelligence to process things the way that an adult does. And so you're talking little kids. When kids act out, usually they're acting out because something has happened and they don't have the words for it. And so, at that preteen stage, you can still take a look at that and be like, okay, this child is acting out because something has happened and
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the words to process it, or they don't have the ability to say what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on the age, a 7-year-old can't process a lot of things. A 12-year-old can process more things, but are they grown up things that they can't process? That's something to pay attention to as well.
That's good. I had heard years ago that a study was done on teenagers and people that were schizophrenic, and that when the kids go through those teenage years, the brain was firing just like it did with the schizophrenic, because the brain was all over the place. It's changing, it's refiring, it's doing going through so many changes. So yeah. And I found that out after my kids were raised. Like, I wish I had known that before, because I found that to be something that made a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think I've also read that, and when that's all going on, there's not necessarily the wherewithal to process all the way to the end of the consequence of the choice.
Right.
This sounds like a good idea. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
With being a little bit removed from the consequence. You know, in theory, adults make decisions based on what's the consequences of my choices, and which consequence can I live with, which consequence can I not. So that's the choice I make, the one I could live with. I don't know that teenagers process it through all that far.
Yeah, not too many, I don't think. Yeah. I made a few of those decisions myself.
Did you?
When I was a teenager, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I didn't.
Oh, I'm sure you didn't. We need to get your sister on here.
No, we don't need my sister on here. She might say otherwise. We don't need that to happen. However, we're twins. So here's the deal. She probably made the same choices right there with me. So she'd be guilty by association.
She may be leaving a comment on YouTube.
I might be getting a text.
Yes, you might be. Warning.
That's possible too.
Well, thank you for all this help you've been giving us tonight. And we love picking your brain. It's fun.
It's fun for me too. I like to be challenged.
Good. Well, folks, we still want to do the Stump the Expert. That would be fun to do. So
that would be super fun.
Yeah. So please leave us your comments, questions, whatever. And again, I will reiterate that we don't give names. We don't even allow those comments to go out until we've seen them. So just go ahead and feel free to leave them. You could also send us a private message on Messenger. You could send us an email, however it is you want to contact us, whatever feels safest to you. But even if you want it kept anonymous and you don't want us to even talk about it, we can address it, and Becky can reply to you the same way you contacted us. And
yeah, you know, I would like to say back to the person who left that comment, if I made it worse, not better, or I made it more muddy somehow, or if there's further feedback that person would like to have, I'd love to have further conversation if necessary. So we can talk about it some more.
Fantastic. I love that. What I found, and I'm just going to encourage you folks even more to reach out to Becky every single time that I went into the shelter, to the office, even when I was not staying at the shelter anymore, and I would go and see her in the office. She always had time for me, always. And she was willing and happy to help. I don't even know how to explain that any better than that, but she literally was grateful. It came across to me that she was grateful that I had reached out to her and had asked her, you know, some questions. And literally that was the birth of what we're doing here, but we didn't know it. That was the last thing we would have even
who'd have thunk it.
Yeah. No, because we were talking, I don't remember if it was on camera tonight or before, but neither one of us have been comfortable in front of the camera. So yeah, this is not something that comes naturally to us, but we enjoy what we're doing.
Very much.
So as always with YouTube, remember to please to like and subscribe and all that good YouTube stuff, and share it with somebody. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And remember that no matter where you are in the process, you are always free to soar.